Hello, this is Mr. Wynn, and today's lesson will be about complex numbers. So there are real numbers, 5, negative 2.3, 1/4, pi, etc., things like that. Then there are imaginary numbers, anything that has I. So far, you've worked only with real numbers. For example, if I asked you to solve what's the square root of 25, you'd tell me, well, that's positive 5, because positive 5 times positive 5 equals 25. You'd also tell me it could be negative 5, because negative 5 times negative 5 equals positive 25. So from here on out, we're going to say that's really plus or minus 5. So positive 5 and negative 5. Now if I ask you what's the square root of negative 25, you'd say, Mr. Wynn, that's impossible. How do I get two numbers that are the same that multiply to become a negative? Because a positive times a positive is a positive, a negative times a negative is a positive. There's no such thing as two things multiplying to a negative. So here comes I. I, the imaginary unit, is defined as I squared equals negative 1, or I equals the square root of negative 1. So hopefully you know that if I give you the square root of 18, you can break that down to the square root of 2 times 9, which breaks down to the square root of 2 times the square root of 9. Well, square root of 2 we don't know, but square root of 9 is just 3. And I put that in front. So that's really 3 square root 2. So back to the square root of negative 25. That's really the same thing as square root of negative 1 times 25. I break that down, that's square root of negative 1 times the square root of 25. Well, we see that that first thing, square root of negative 1 is just I. And square root of 25 you do know is 5. So this is 5i. We do the number first, letter second. And actually we should put positive and negative. So positive and negative 5i. So you probably didn't know this, but in the calculator there's I. I is at the very bottom, so I press second and the period, the dot, decimal point. So look, I do 5i times 5i, so that 5i squared is negative 25. So, example 1, solve this. Well, if you can get a letter squared by itself, and there's no other letters, you can do the square root property. So for A, I have x squared plus 64 equals 0. I could get x by itself by subtracting 64, and I get x squared equals negative 64. When we have a letter squared by itself, we can square root both sides. So x equals, and the square part has to be positive and negative. The square root of 64, well, there's a square root of a negative, so I comes out, and the square root of 64 is just 8. So really, this answer, x equals positive or negative 8i. On the other one, I need to get x squared by itself, so I'm going to subtract 100, both sides. So I'm just sum for x squared, so 4x squared equals negative 100. Then I need to divide by 4. So x squared equals negative 25. Oh, hey, there it is again. Square both sides. So x equals, when we square root something, you must have positive and negative. And remember, square root of negative, it has to have I. Square root of 25, just 5. So that's really x equals positive or negative 5i, like before. So that is the square root property. Now you need to know these. I cannot have any exponents in your answer. So I to the first is just that square root of negative 1, which is just I. I squared is by definition negative 1. I cubed is I squared times I. If I replace I squared with negative 1 from above and leave the I there, that's just negative I. Then I to the fourth, the same as I squared times I squared, which is negative 1 times negative 1, which equals 1. Then that pattern just repeats itself. So really I to the fifth is really I to the fourth times I. Well, I to the fourth right above is 1 times I, which is just I. I to the sixth is I to the fourth times I squared. Well, I to the fourth is positive 1. I squared is negative 1, so that's just negative 1. I to the seventh is I to the fourth times, you could say I cubed. So I to the fourth is positive 1. I cubed is just negative I. So 1 times negative I is just negative I. And I to the eighth is I to the fourth times I to the fourth, which is just 1 times 1, which is 1. So the pattern repeats. So they might ask you to figure out what is I to the 26th. So the way I do this is I just subtract 4 until I get back from that exponent until I get back to one of the original 4. Either I to the first power, second power, third power, fourth power. So I to the 26th is the same thing as I to the 22nd. We'll subtract 4 again, that's really I to the 18th. Subtract 4 again, that's I to the 14th. Subtract 4 again, that's I to the 10th, and so on and so on. Now, a faster way is multiplying. So I'm trying to figure out what multiple of 4 is really close to 26. Well, I could do 4 times 7, that's 28. But 28 is too high, so I'll do 4 times 6, that's 24. So I can do 26 minus 24, that's 2. This is the same thing as I squared. And I squared, I memorized, was -1. So I could check using the calculator. Remember, I is second decimal. I to the 26th power is, that's not going to shoot. That is actually -1. Calculator has an error on there. All right, next. Imaginary numbers can go with real numbers. For example, consider the form a plus bi, where a and b are real numbers, I is imaginary. We have a real part, a, and we have an imaginary part, the bi part. And when we have both parts together, we call that a complex number. So for example, 5 minus 2i is a complex number. This part is real, that's 5. This part is imaginary. Alright, and then all the math stuff you know still works with imaginaries. So you can still add, subtract, multiply, divide, distribute, stuff like that. So simplify the following. A says -5i times 3i. Number times number, letter times letter. -5 times 3 is -15. I times I is I squared. Now I memorize that. Remember, your answer is going to have exponents for I, so you have to change that. So -15 is still there. I squared is really -1. So -15 times -1 is +15. That's the answer there. I could check that using a calculator. Hopefully mine's updated. -5i times 3i gives me +15. Next one, you can still distribute. So if I distribute that, number times number, that's 8. Letter times letter, I squared times I is I cubed. 2 times 5 is +10, I squared. Now again, you cannot have exponents for I in your answer, so you gotta change that. Well, I cubed is the same thing as we go back. I cubed is the same thing as -i. So 8 times -i plus 10 I squared is the same as -1. Let's multiply that, so that's really -8i minus 10. And we usually have the real part first, so I'm going to rearrange that to -10 minus 8i. Alright, and again, I'll use the calculator to check that. So 2i squared times 4i plus 5. It ends with -10 minus 8i. Alright, the bottom C and D is just adding, subtracting. Now there's no distributing here, so be careful. So since I don't enter any numbers, I can just write that like normal. 5 minus 7i plus 2 plus 4i. Combine like terms. So 5 plus and 2 go together, 7. -7i plus 4i, that's -3i. And this last one, we're subtracting. Remember, when you're subtracting, there's a -1, you got to distribute that. So this front stays the same. That's -3, that's +6i. Combine like terms, so 4 minus 3 is 1, -8i plus 6i is -2i. That's my answer there. So besides distributing, multiplying, adding, subtracting, you can still do this FOIL, or again, it's just distributing. So I'm going to multiply this by both of these. So 2 times 9 is 18. 2 times -4i is -8i. Then this times both of these. +4i times +9 is +36i. +4i times -4i is -16i squared. We have to combine like terms, so the middle goes together. 18, see, that is plus 28i minus 16i squared. But now I can't put I squared. I need to replace that with -1. Remember, no exponents for I. So I'm still going. So that's 18 plus 28i. Well, -16 times -1 is +16. I got to combine that with the first number. So 18 plus 16 is 30. Sorry, no. Yeah, it is 34 plus 28i is my final answer there. So I'll check using a calculator. that was parentheses 2 plus 4i times 9 minus 4i. The final answer is 34 plus 28i. So one last one, B, distribute. So this positive 3 times both these. Well, 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15i. Negative 2i times negative 2 is positive 4i. Negative 2i times negative 5i is positive 10i squared. Combine like terms, basically the i's in the middle combine, so that's negative 6. Negative 15i plus 4i is negative 11i plus 10i squared, but you can't put i squared. Replace i squared with negative 1. We got to multiply that. So these stay the same. 10 times negative 1 is negative 10. And then combine the negative 6 and the negative 10. That makes negative 16 minus 11i. Alright, so I'll leave you with this practice problem. Simplify that. Basically, distribute a FOIL, and there's the answer. If you can do that, you should be fine on the quiz in class. And this is Mr. Wynn. Thanks for watching. See you in class.